Hello, this is Trading with Confidence, and I'm John Breland. So today I'm going to talk about what I call the surge oscillator. This oscillator is something that I derived from my experience as a mechanical engineer. So essentially what I did was I applied physical principles, that is Newtonian physics, to the markets. And I developed an oscillator that over a period of time, I started to recognize signals that I discovered produce very, very good results for trading. So before I get into this oscillator, I think it's best that I give you a little bit of derivation. So first, I want to show you what the oscillator looks like. The oscillator looks similar to stochastics. You see these oscillations, but you'll notice that there's not a 100 or 0. So what I'm doing with these oscillations is I'm looking at them in comparison with where the market is. And it's able to tell me whether we're near a top or a bottom of the market. And I use this consistently to make profitable trades. But before I really get into this, I need to instill some trust into you that this is not just any old oscillator, or that it is really something special. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to go over the derivation process of how I came up with this oscillator to show you that it really is truly a physics application in the markets. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to go over to this article in Wikipedia about jerk, and it's a physics article, and it gives the derivation of jerk here. So down in this article, there is a graph that explains what's happening very, very well right here. Now keep in mind that even though the article is about jerk, I really can't name an oscillator jerk. So I've chosen the word surge instead. And surge and jerk really are the same thing. It's just a different name. So I have increased the size of this chart to make it easier to see. So what this chart is showing is what happens to an object when forces are applied upon it over time. And the best way to explain this is like in a car. So when you're in your car and you're at a stoplight and you want to get to the other stoplight, when your light turns green, you accelerate the car and then you stop at the next stoplight. This graph is explaining what's happening here. So imagine this light blue is the position of the car. So this is the distance the car travels. This is the time it takes for the car to travel that distance. So in the very beginning, when you press on the acceleration, you can see the car starts to move up towards its destination. It gains speed, reaches a constant speed, which is like 35 miles an hour on the street. And then you put on the brake and the car slows down, and finally stops at the next light. So it's achieved this distance from here to here in this amount of time. Okay? So now the distance that the car moved is actually derived from the velocity the car had. Okay? So this is the velocity profile for the car. Let's go over that. So at the beginning, you're waiting at the light, you press on the accelerator, the car starts to move faster and faster. Let's say it's going 10 miles an hour now it's going 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, something like that. As it's going down the road, now it's going 35 miles an hour, and it stays at 35 miles an hour until you apply the brake, and the car slows down, 15, 10, 5, and it reaches the destination and you've stopped. So that is what the velocity curve looks like in that scenario. Now, the velocity is derived from acceleration. And acceleration is the force you feel in the back of your seat when you accelerate, and the force you feel when you put on the brakes. So that's represented by this green line here. So for the green line, this is an indication that you've pressed on the pedal. The acceleration starts to move up until you feel a stronger force back into your seat. Now, at this point, the car is starting to move, and the velocity of the car is starting to come up. But now the acceleration is constant because the car only has so much power. It can't forever accelerate. That would be like a rocket, right? So it accelerates to a constant acceleration. And while it's accelerating, you feel it, and the car is moving faster and faster until you let off on the pedal and the acceleration goes down to 0. Well, when the acceleration is down to 0, the car is still moving at 35 miles an hour. It's just you're just cruising along. There's no force in the back of your seat. There's no brake force. The car is just moving at a constant speed. Then you apply the brakes, and the acceleration force goes in the opposite direction and starts to slow the speed down. And the distance of the car starts, because it's slowing, it's taking longer and longer to get the same distance, and until the velocity goes back down to 0 and the car is stopped at that next light. Okay, so one step deeper, the surge derives the acceleration. So what the surge basically means is the intent to press that pedal. It's that initial press the pedal. It can be considered to be almost instantaneous, which it really isn't instantaneous, but it's almost instantaneous. And then the acceleration of the car, because it has to wind up, it starts increasing until you get to a certain level of acceleration where you say, okay, I've achieved enough acceleration. I've pushed on the accelerator enough, and the car is now accelerating. You're feeling that force. Now, after a period of time, you decide I don't need to accelerate anymore because I'm going pretty much as fast as I want to go, and you let off that acceleration pedal a little bit. And you let out the acceleration pedal, the accelerator starts to move down until you have no acceleration, and the car is just cruising along at 35 miles an hour or so. And then you decide, okay, I now need to start to apply the brakes. I'm getting close to my destination, which is the next light. You say, okay, now I'm going to apply the brakes, and the car starts to decelerate. It gets to a point of max acceleration, or the max amount of brake pressure you want to put on. The car slows down, the speed is going down, the movement is starting to go down, and then you get to a certain point where you want to let the brakes off, and the acceleration goes back to 0. Now you're stopped, and you don't feel any force in the back of your seat or against the wheel. So in a sense, this chart mimics the stock market. And imagine that this is stock or a crypto, and in the beginning it's at some level down here. Over time, the price moves up, and then it turns around at a top, right? Or stops at the top and turns around. Well, what the surge oscillator is doing is it's this portion, it's this red here. So what's important in the market is to know what's going to happen before it happens. That's the key to making money in the market. You have to know the market is going to go up before it goes up. You have to know the market is going to go down before it goes down. So as you can see here, before the actual movement of the car, what has to exist? Velocity has to exist, or has to begin to exist first. And before velocity exists, you have to have acceleration. You have to start accelerating before the velocity moves up. And before the acceleration, you need to have the intent to press that pedal or just set that pedal. So as you can see, the surge occurs first before anything happens. And this is exactly what this oscillator is doing. It's giving you a signal before the actual event occurs, or the intent of that signal in the first place. So it's like you'll get the signal here, this is going to happen, the market starts to move, and then you finally get this signal to slow, and the market slows down. So this is essentially the principle behind this is exactly the same when applied to the markets. So the markets add one extra concept, which are cycles. So this whole surge oscillator is a mixture of the reality of market cycles plus this very principle of the surge appearing before the actual result in price. So you may be asking yourself, how is it possible that I can equate physics principles with trading, which is, people trading? And because one is matter, the other one is, people making decisions. So the way I explain this is that there are some similarities here. There really are. If you look at this chart again and imagine this is the stock that's moving up, and you see at the beginning that it's starting to move in one particular direction. Well, what happens? Well, there's a subset of people that get interested in it. So I like to think of the velocity as interest. As the market starts to go, there are some people that are interested in getting in on it. As time passes, more and more people recognize that the market is moving up, and because of that, more and more people climb on. It is a common psychological principle that if there's a crowd, for example, and one person dances. In the beginning, there's not a whole lot of people dancing along. But as people join in the dance, more and more people join in over time until everybody starts dancing. And that's exactly like this chart here. In the beginning, there's one person dancing, and after a little while, more people start dancing with that person, and then more people in the crowd start dancing until everybody's dancing. And at some point, the dancing does have to stop. And there's eventually a point where there's the last man standing, or couple, or whatever, that are dancing, and the whole thing just stops. So this I like to call it like interest. The interest to get involved increases. But the thing is, there is a limited number of people that can be interested in any stock at any time. It's not unlimited. So you eventually reach a limit where everybody's getting involved, the stock's moving up. But then as the stock gets higher and higher, some of these people want to sell because they're in a profit. And there becomes less and less buyers and more sellers in the market until it reaches an equilibrium between the buyers and sellers, and the market reaches a top. So there really is this direct connection between this physics model and psychology. So there is a direct correlation in my opinion, and the fact is that this system does work. It's very profitable, and it's been proven in practice. So that's all I have for now for understanding the surge oscillator. Of course, there's a lot more, and I'll be getting into that in future videos. So if you learned something new, please like and subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thank you.